like to thank everyone for coming today as members of the press. I appreciate you taking the time to cover what is clearly one of the most important responsibilities of our state, and that is the education of our children and how we go about taking care of this primary responsibility. I want to thank those who are here supporting Senate Bill 167, and I want to thank Senator Barry Loudermilk, one of our co-sponsors of the bill, for being with us today. Before we get started, I wanted to confirm that at 1 p.m. today, up in room 307 in this building, we will be presenting Senate Bill 167. And certainly we welcome all of you to be there to listen to the very important testimony which will be presented. As most of you know, it's taken a lot of work by many people, including some of you standing in this room, to get to the point where we're ready to present this bill to the Education Committee. To give our reasons why the state of Georgia should do everything in its power to release itself from the commitment of the Common Core and the PARC, which is the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. And the reason that I'm convinced that we must do this is because of what I'm hearing from you, our parents, our teachers, school superintendents, from experts in the field of education who clearly know what they're talking about and understand the faults and the dangers of this program. Now, I'm sure that the previous administration had the best of intentions when it applied for the Race to the Top grant, but the lack of the accountability to parents and taxpayers and teachers in this state has simply been stunning. First of all, there's been no thorough cost analysis of what this is going to cost the state from these unfunded mandates. No one has ever answered the long-term cost of implementing the Common Core. We're just now finding out that the cost to implement the PARC will cost this state an additional $30 million a year. That was never vetted and discussed or disclosed when we went into this program. Secondly, allowing a consortium of states to work with nonprofits and other unaccountable parties to develop our standards without open public oversight is simply untenable in a free country, especially considering that Georgia taxpayers support K through 12 education with $13 billion of hard-earned money every year. Georgia needs a transparent, democratic process, a developing curriculum standards, and a means to ensure more direct accountability at the local level, not groups in Washington, D.C. We will be presenting this afternoon some testimony of some very important people, and I'd like to take a moment and introduce them to you, and I'll invite them to, once I finish introducing them, to say a few words to you, and then we'll open it up for questions. First, our first speaker will be Ms. Jane Robbins. She's a citizen of Georgia, a Harvard-trained attorney, and a senior fellow with the Americans Principles Project. Many of you probably recognize Jane as the face on the video, Stop the National Core Power Grab, Reclaim Local Control of Education. And here is Dr. Sandra Stopsky. She is most likely the nation's leading expert on the English language arts standards. She served as a member of the Common Core Validation Committee, but refused to sign the standards. She has served as a senior associate commissioner in the Massachusetts Department of Education and is the recently retired professor of education reform, 21st century chair in teacher quality at the University of Arkansas. Then we have Mr. Zev Werman. He's a visiting scholar at the Hoover Institution and former senior advisor at the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development in the U.S. Department of Education. Throughout the development of the Common Core standards in 2009 and 2010, he analyzed the mathematical drafts for the state of California. I believe you'll find his comments very interesting. Then we have Dr. Jim Arnold. He's a seasoned educator who's been a teacher, an assistant principal, and now serves as a superintendent of the Pelham City Schools here in Georgia, and married into a family of educators. She studied accounting at Kennesaw State University graduated in 2001 with a bachelor's in business administration. Today, she'll be conveying the concerns of many parents whom I've heard from about the unfortunate consequences of this program. And finally, we'll have Ms. Judy Kraft, who's of Norcross, who's a former field director for the Georgia Christian Alliance and current co-chair of the Civic and Moral Concerns Ministry at First Redeemer Church in Cumming. She's a grandmother, citizen, and former reading specialist. She earned her master's in reading at Georgia State University and worked as a reading specialist for elementary grade students in DeKalb County. Why don't we open it up and ask each of you to make a statement, and then we'll open it up for some questions.
Thank y'all for coming today. This is great. This is a wonderful turnout. We so appreciate that. I'm Jane Robbins. In 2010, some officials in the state committed Georgia to a radical restructuring of education in this country, which involves setting standards, drafting standards by experts in Washington, and then having the federal government enforce those standards on the states. That's what happened. It was done without notifying, much less consulting, parents or teachers or taxpayers or the legislature. And so until recently, most legislators didn't even know this had happened. Well, it has happened, but now we're starting to figure out what has happened. Now the word is getting out, and people are starting to unwrap this and see exactly what happened. And what we realize is that it is a complete perversion of our Constitution. The Constitution leaves education in the hands of the states. We are backing Senator Liggins' bill because that would restore the constitutional balance. This was a deficient process that resulted in mediocre standards. We can do better than this. We don't have to settle for Common Core, and we don't have to settle for letting somebody else make our decisions for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stotts.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak to all of you. I will only speak briefly now because I have much more detail in my written testimony, but I'd like to pick up on the point that Jane Robbins just made about the process. I was not only in the Department of Education in Massachusetts in charge of developing all of our K-12 standards, so I know about the civic process, the procedures to use for the development of standards at the state level, but I have also been very active in my own home community all my life. League of Women Voters, elected library trustee, and a town meeting member, 2 elected offices in my home community, and know all about such things as minutes of meetings, summaries, motions, and how to make sure that one lets the public know what is going on. And I was on Common Core's validation committee, and no matter what I tried to do to find out what was happening behind the scenes, what they were doing with the critiques that I was sending them regularly of the English language arts standards, my specialty, I never got any answers back. Unfortunately, the Gates Foundation had chosen the people it wanted to be on the standards writing committee, and they were not looking as if they were going to be responsive to any criticisms coming from even the validation committee, which had been charged with creating critiques and interacting with the particular people who were writing standards. So this was a very much behind-the-scenes operation with unresponsive people and no opportunity to even find out what the critiques were that this committee had, because we couldn't get a hold of those either. So I was then one of the 5 people on this validation committee who refused to sign off because I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, and it was unacceptable from a civic point of view as well as from the actual product. I think we can now move on to the next person, Tim Werman.